at least for myself, this is the first time since before COVID I've been around so many presumably healthy lawyers, and definitely the first time I've been around such a talkative group, which is nice to see. One thing I do need, oh, good, you're here. The three judges, we're going to have to put lapel mics on you, and this gentleman here to my right will do that for you if you want to come over now, and he can do that while we're doing introductions. As I said at the beginning, the Frank McKinney, Randall Shepard, Frank? Why did I say Frank? Okay, the Larry McKinney, Randall Shepard, Indianapolis in the Court welcomes you. Just very briefly, it's interesting, at least for me to note, that 10 years after Judge Barker ascended to the bench, the Indianapolis Inner Court was founded. Dean Lefstein of the law school and Judge McKinney and Chief Justice Shepard and myself had a lunch at the Indianapolis Athletic Club and began work together to create this inn. It's been around for 30 years, and so this is a very special evening for our inn to be able to celebrate Judge Barker's 40th year on the bench. I do want to take a moment to thank the members of the committee who put this together, Judge Tanya Pratt, Judge Doris Pryor, who's not here, Ann Cowger, Fran Watson, Sharon Jackson, Tim Haley, who's not here, and last but definitely not the least, Nancy Gargula and Kelly Barr. Excuse me. Ooh. Hey. As you can tell now that I'm a general counsel, I don't practice before the federal bench, so Judge Barr has little control over me. Tomorrow I'll probably be in court or in jail, but that's the group that put this together, and I want to thank them, and I would appreciate a round of applause for all those folks who put it together. At this time, I'm going to introduce and bring up Sharon Jackson, one of the committee members. She has a special honor to give Judge Barker, and then after Sharon finishes with that, Judge Pratt will come up with a brief introduction of the Chief Justice Randall Shepard, and then we'll start with the evening. Judge, you can come up this way. Okay.
Nope, I'll let you guys go first. You want to go, Barbara? You want to go first?
I'll give you water.
Well, it's so wonderful to see everyone here tonight to celebrate this amazing life and legacy of Judge Barker. And so thank you all for being here. I am here on behalf of Governor Holcomb. I'm his Deputy General Counsel, but I am here, and unfortunately he could not join us tonight, but he asked me to say a few words on his behalf. And he wanted me to start by saying that the Sagamore of the Wabash Award was established in the mid-1940s by then Governor Gates and has been bestowed by governors since then. The term Sagamore, the connotation Sagamore, was chosen because Native American tribes who were in this area at the time used it to denote a leader among their tribe to whom the chief would look for wisdom and advice. And each governor since Governor Gates has presented Sagamores as a personal tribute to those who have rendered distinguished service to the state of Indiana. And among the citizens who have contributed greatly to our Hoosier heritage, the woman we honor tonight has done so with integrity, wisdom, and grace, and she is our tonight's honoree. So it is with great honor that I, on behalf of Governor Holcomb, can bestow a Sagamore from the Wabash on Sarah Evans Barker. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chief Judge Pratt.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, it's time to wake up. We're going to have a wonderful evening. Good evening, everyone. I have the honor of introducing tonight's Master of Ceremonies. There he is over there. One of the most well-known, recognizable, and respected jurors, not only here in the state of Indiana, but throughout our country. Following an illustrious career as executive assistant to Evansville Mayor Russell Lloyd, as a special assistant to the Undersecretary of the United States Department of Transportation, and as a state trial judge, Randall T. Shepard was appointed to the Indiana Supreme Court by then Governor Robert Orr in 1985 at the very young age of 38. 2 years later, in 1987, he became the Chief Justice, and he served in that capacity until his retirement as a senior judge in 2012. 25 years later, making him the longest serving Chief Justice in Indiana's history. Growing up in Evansville, Indiana, Chief Justice Shepard is a seventh-generation Hoosier. He earned an undergraduate degree from Princeton University cum laude in 1969 and a J.D. degree from Yale School of Law in 1972, as well as a Master of Law degrees from the University of Virginia in 1995. As a justice, he authored more than 900 majority opinions and published more than 65 law review articles. The Randall T. Shepard Academy Leadership and Law Academy is located in Evansville, Indiana, and is named in his honor, as is this Inn of Court, which you've heard. In 2018, in his honor, the inn was renamed the Chief Judge Larry J. McKinney and Chief Judge Randall T. Shepard, Indianapolis Inn of Court. He's had an incomparable impact on the advancement of the legal profession in Indiana, as well as throughout our country, in particular with his establishing with the Indiana General Assembly at his urging the Indiana Conference for Legal Education Opportunity, the ICLEO program. And my daughter is a recipient of that. I know there are plenty of ICLEO fellows in this room tonight. So thank you for that, Chief Justice Shepard. For many years, he's been a very dear friend to tonight's guest of honor, Judge Sarah Evans Barker, so it is fitting that she requested him to serve as the Master of Ceremonies for tonight's wonderful celebration. Without further ado, come on up, Chief Justice Shepard. I present to some and introduce to others our Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you, Your Honor, and oh my goodness, what a thrill it is to see this wonderful assembly here for a noble purpose. And I'm pleased to have the chance to introduce our three presenters. The first is Judge Barbara Crabb. Welcome to Indiana. Glad to have you here. Judge Crabb is from the Western District of Wisconsin, where she, of course, where she served as chief judge for a period of time. She was a graduate twice at the University of Wisconsin, first undergrad, then law school. And when she graduated in 1962, early in the year, as I understand it, she was the only woman who stood up, introduced by the dean. It was a time when there weren't very many women in law school, and Judge Crabb was there to carry the case, right? Judge Crabb has been prominent in famous cases on religious liberty and more recently on redistricting. And she's the only person I've ever met who was born in Green Bay. And I've always been told that if you were born in Green Bay, you got a piece of the ownership of the Packers. Is that, are you an owner of the Green Bay Packers? Maybe not. Okay. I think they treat that quietly. And Judge Robert Miller, also a former chief, but in the Northern District of Indiana, and before that, a state trial judge. Bravo. Bob Miller went to Northwestern University and the McKinney School of Law here in our state, and he is this year's American Inns of Court Award winner for the Professionalism Award in the Seventh Circuit. So congratulations to Bob. It fit well with the fact that they've named the courtroom after him there in the in South Bend. His national contributions are really remarkable. He was a member of the multi-district litigation panel, and more amazingly, a member of the FISA court, which most of us hadn't heard about until recently. Did you keep your iPad in the closet locked? Or
you wouldn't believe.
You wouldn't, yeah, that's probably right. But most of us have benefited from Judge Miller's work. There's a lot of times when I've come up across some difficult question, and I would open up the book called Evidence by Robert L. Miller, Jr., and found the answer, for heaven's sakes. And there's something, I hope you know this, but it's very important. He finally gave that up after a couple of decades worth of contributions to the law. But you can still buy a Robert L. Miller book of evidence. I tried that today. I looked it up on the computer, and you can buy a Robert Miller book, but it's a little pricey. Why don't you tell them what the price is?
Oh, this is embarrassing. What is it? Oh my!
Yeah.
Did you buy it? My royalty's still coming.
Tell them what it is.
$1,099. But you earn 200 Amazon points if you.
Exactly. Bravo. Hallelujah. Well, I'll think about it.
Please.
I'll let you know. You can take the family out for dinner or something. And then, of course, our honoree, Judge Barker, former chief, of course, of this district. She was followed as chief by Larry McKinney, and that's a special connection to the inn tonight. Frequently known as, you all would know this, the pride of Mishawaka, and we are glad for that. A graduate of IU and American University School of Law, and one of the things she's contributed is that 3 children have gone to Indiana University, and the trustees and the state are grateful for this. Did Ken go to IU as well? Well, you got it all covered. That's terrific. She served for a period of time, must have been a famous and fabulous experience as an assistant to United States Senator Charles Percy of Illinois, a very leading figure in the Congress, and later became U.S. Attorney, and then a member of the court appointed and confirmed. I want you to know that my former colleague, Brent Dixon, who became Chief Justice after I left, and before Loretta Rush, would be here tonight. He and his wife, Jan, were both coming. He wrote me today and said that they could not come after all because it turns out they both have COVID. Mm-hmm. And I wrote him back and told him we hope that turned out well. But he wrote something, and I'm going to read you a piece of what Justice Dixon wrote me. And then, by the way, are you going to give her a warning on rights? Does she get? But
I'll be under oath.
You'll be under oath. All right. Well, that's good enough.
We won't.
Here's what Justice Dixon wrote me this afternoon, and I think it's altogether fitting. He said, "Judge Barker is and has been a spectacular example of the best in judicial service. She is admired not only for the quality of her work, but also for the inspirational legacy she has established for future generations of lawyers and judges. Indiana has been richly blessed by her good and faithful service, to which I say, Amen. Thank you to all for being part of it.
I have a few words of introduction that I want to make before I give myself over to the questioners here. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, each one. I could go around each table. I think I've seen most of you individually to give you a hug and tell you how much it matters to me that you're here. And quite apart from the cost of Bob Miller's book, I know some of you had to put out a lot of money. My clerks were wondering why they had to buy tickets when they hear these stories over and over every day. So I've had to do some persuasive argumentation here, but I have several people I want to introduce, including them. So let me just augment what you've already heard with a special thank you to my two dear friends, longtime colleagues. We're all peers as federal district court judges in the 7th Circuit. The committee who was putting this together allowed me free rein in deciding basically how to structure this. I said, please, no speech from me. I do have some remarks at the end. I know you'll want to stay for them. They said, well, then what? And I said, how about a conversation? And they said, okay, great. And so who? And immediately, of course, I thought of my two confidants, people who have discussed many matters with me over the years. And Barbara was a judge before I was. Bob was just about a year after I was. So we really have been in the trenches together. And we've shared so many stories and so many experiences, and they are beloved friends. Randy Shepard, of course, is a special friend as well. I have many dear memories with him, but often we would be at the admission ceremonies for new lawyers sitting next to each other. I'd be there as a district court judge for our district. And Randy would be in the middle presiding and holding forth in his usual eloquent way. And sometimes it was just, I got outside myself to see myself sitting next to Randy Shepard as he spoke. And really, just to be in that close proximity and to hear how he was putting together, it was wonderfully spontaneous and warm and welcoming, enthusiastic, exactly, as you would expect him to say to new lawyers. But it was special just to be that close next to him. We did it many times together. And we'd sort of, after we would finish our speeches, we would have little asides like, or something like that. But we've been friends for a long time. So now let me introduce my family members who are here. You all know Ken, and you'd better applaud right now for Ken. And two of our three kids could be here. Grady could not. Grady lives now in Nyack. He just moved from Brooklyn. Too busy to come, but I know he would like to be here. But Kate is here, Kate Barker Rogers from New York. And she absented herself from her family in order to come. And Susan Barker Yaley and Brian Yaley from Bloomington. My sister Margie and my brother Jim, who think that they're the pride of Mishawaka. And my brother-in-law Ron Barker and his wife Karen Barker. Mostly at this table is my current court family, and so I won't go through the entire ranks so we can move along, but I want you to see my law clerks and my judicial assistant. My court reporter is working tonight. The courtroom deputy, I said, and the law clerks, and Sarah Dame, who many of you know has been with me for 16 years. So you stand, Sarah. Almost all my colleagues from the district court are here. You know who they are because you practice law, all of you here. Many of my old law clerks have come, and they've come from New York, they've come from Washington, from many places to be here. It was a huge surprise to see them. If you're a former law clerk, would you stand up so everybody can see you, David? Amy? The brain trust, the brain trust. So I think that the others have been noted specifically, but I do want to add my thanks to the planning committee who put in so many hours and did so much work. You made it very easy to do my part tonight, so we'll get underway. The game plan, I think, is that my questioners are going to alternate with their questions, and I'll try my best to reminisce and to remember some of these occasions. I did make a few notes because I told them, you better tell me what your questions are. I didn't do that in undergraduate school, but I would have done better if I had. So I'm just going to use my notes to refresh my memory as to what I can tell you that might be of interest to you. So who wants to lead off here?
All right.
Okay, Barbara.
Make sure,
Got the little button on top.
there it goes.
You're
All right. Sarah, I've had the privilege and pleasure of knowing you since shortly after you became a federal judge. For instance, I know that your mother had the smart idea to sign you up for public speaking courses, and that this has stood you in good stead. Unfortunately, my mother was more interested in my sister and me getting ballet lessons. That has not been useful. But there are some things that I don't know. For instance, I don't know what led you to become a lawyer.
Is that the question?
That's the question.
I have to do the same thing in court. Is that the question?
That's the question.
Well, you're right about Mother. Mother and Dad both were from the South, and Mother thought that her daughters ought to be competent, and they ought to be able to hold forth in public. And she arranged, it was all Mother's doing. Dad was happy to go along with it. But it was Mother's doing that we took what was called dramatic arts lessons. It sounds more frou-frou than it was. But my sister Margie and my sister Laura and I would go on Monday nights over to the other side of South Bend, and we would have lessons with Mrs. Millar, who would give us poems and readings, recitations that we were supposed to memorize so that we could give performances and so forth. Mother was our agent. Mother never turned down anybody who asked for the Evans girls to come and give a program. And so we got trotted out for a lot of stuff. The worst was the Christmas party at the VFW when everybody was drunk. And the three little Evans girls had to come and do poems that were sort of nice and sweet. I was totally lost on that audience. My mother was a teetotaler, so we talked to her about her choice of events for us after that she'd thrown us into a bar setting. It did not change her plans. She continued to sign us up for things. So how and why I decided to be a lawyer is sort of I suppose an interesting question. We didn't have any lawyers in my family. I was in student government in Bloomington at IU. I had a very good relationship with a counselor for our dorm. I was the president of the dorm. And we were working on something like my junior year. I was the proverbial cork on the ocean in undergraduate school. I didn't have a major until my junior year. So I was just treating it like a smorgasbord. Just take whatever sounds fun, whatever you could work into your schedule, etc. And the counselor, who was a graduate student, said, I think you should go to law school. And the idea caught me completely off guard. If she had said, I think you should be an astronaut, it wouldn't have been any more far-fetched as far as I was concerned. But it planted a seed, and I thought, well, what would that entail? So I started doing some research. I went to the library and looked at bulletins, and I wound up going over by the law school one day. Leon Wallace was the dean. And I don't know what prompted me to do this. I really wasn't all that brave. But I went in and I thought, well, maybe I should talk to the dean of the law school. I was an undergrad. I didn't know any women did this sort of thing. And I walked in and the secretary said, well, it turns out Dean Wallace is here. And I'm sure he'd be glad to talk to you. I didn't even tell her what I was calling about. So here I was ushered into the dean's office, and I had to think of something to say. And I said, well, I'm thinking about maybe I should apply to go to law school. I just wondered what you thought about that. So, I mean, I was a total walk-in. But he didn't dismiss me. He did not say, what? He didn't do anything to discourage me. He says, here's how you'll know. And he said, you know, do you have pretty good grades? Can you write? Do you like to read? Do you have an interest in a tough law school routine and regimen? These are the things you'll need to know, that you'll want to know. So I wasn't sure how to answer those things, but it was the first year of the LSAT tests. So I had to sign up for that. And you know, once you put some money on the table, you get a little invested in it. And I had to pay to take the test and pay to apply to law schools. And then I was invested in it. But I got very far down the road with these plans before I mentioned them to anybody, because I was frankly quite embarrassed that people would think I had overestimated my abilities, that I was bragging. So I didn't tell anybody. In fact, I even delayed telling my folks, and we were very close. We would have confided, but I was waiting to see how it felt with me. And then when I mentioned it, my mom and dad said, well, where did that idea come from? So they were bemused too. So that's really how it got started.
Well,
What led you to become a prosecutor? And didn't you spend some time in Washington?
Yes. I went to American University. I actually started out at William & Mary, but I needed a job while I was going to school. And so I got a job up in D.C. at the D.C. Parole Board, and enrolled at American University and graduated from there. And I got a job with a congressman the last semester. So now, there are many points in my life history where things happened in a serendipitous, unplanned, entirely unpredictable way. This was one of them. So I got into my senior year in law school. I was working 20 hours a week. I was doing some extracurricular things. I was on the law review, but I was pretty busy trying to work 20 hours and go to law school. But I got to my senior year and I didn't have any plan. And so I thought, well, maybe I better go see the associate dean, his name was Tony Morella. And I didn't know what I was going to talk to him about either, except that I didn't have a job, and I thought I better figure it out. So I put on a dress, and I went up to his office, and he had me wait by the door. He was on the phone. And the call went on a bit, and I was trying not to eavesdrop. I wasn't eavesdropping, but as soon as it was finished, he motioned me in, and he said, I knew him because I had done well in the class that he taught, but I didn't really know very many people. I was not one of the movers and shakers at the law school. But he motions me in and he says, hey, would you like a job on the Hill? I said, well, yeah, more than anything. And he said, can you start now? It was the beginning of my last semester. I said, yeah, whatever. Yeah. And he was talking to his congressman friend, who was from a suburban Maryland district, and he needed a legislative assistant. So I figured out that I could work there, and I got my hours down enough that I could finish still and graduate on time. So stars aligned, and that's all I can say. It just happened. Hey, would you like a job on the Hill? So I did work first for a congressman and then for Senator Percy. I was a legislative assistant for both. Then I worked for a committee. Then I worked on Senator Percy's 1972 campaign. The way I got back out here was thanks to Ken Barker, who was practicing law. Ken and I had gone to high school together, and we were good friends. We ran in the same pack of friends, and we stayed friends all those years. He had gone off to Harvard to law school, and then he had a military commitment. It was back during Vietnam, but he was lucky. He got to go to Germany. And after he finished his 2 years, he came back to Indianapolis and took a job at Bose, McKinney & Evans. So as I said, we'd always stayed in touch. And Ken decided about that time he was ready to get married. So he asked me, the whither thou goest syndrome, I came back here from D.C. And I needed another job, of course, when I came to Indianapolis. So because I had Washington connections, there was a guy in Senator Percy's office named Irish McRae, who was a very good friend of Harlington Wood, who happened to be the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office at the Department of Justice. And my friend, Irish, said, any help I can provide you going back to Indiana? I said, well, maybe. He says, well, my friend Harlington Wood is in charge of U.S. attorneys. So he called him, and there was not a vacancy in southern Indiana, but they had put in for another authorized spot. So the fix was not in. It's just that I knew that the spot was going to be available. So I applied, and I flew out here, and Ken and I had decided to get married by then. And I interviewed, and it went fine. Nobody told me that there were no women in the office, that they'd never hired any women. Stanley Miller was the U.S. attorney, and he interviewed me and then extended the offer to me, and I said, okay, sure, great, I'll be here. We're getting married the end of November. I'll be here by the first of the next year, 1973. So I didn't know there were no women. When I came to be back from our honeymoon, I called, and he said, come in, we'll get you sworn in, and I'll introduce you around. And you might want to invite your husband. And I thought, this is like going to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. My husband would probably not like to come, but I'll invite him. So it turns out it was a full-blown press conference because they were announcing the hiring of the first woman. Charles Goodloe, my great friend, who was the first African-American selected for the U.S. Attorney's Office 6 months before me. Both of us were barrier breakers. And it was Stanley Miller who did it. So if you want to thank somebody, it would be Stanley B. Miller, who became, after U.S. Attorney, he became an Indiana Court of Appeals judge. So I knew about press conferences from being in Washington. I had not been the subject of a press conference. Happily that day I wore my pearls. And my picture showed up above the fold on the Indianapolis News in the afternoon. And that generated enough attention that I knew that I was going to have to do this job well and right because people were paying attention. That's a pretty long answer.
Let me take back just a little